One of my favorite things, especially for babies and children's clothing, is to do a buttonhole. So today I'm going to show you how to knit a buttonhole into a project so that you can apply this to sweaters or even to this cute little diaper cover like I made for my sister's baby. You can add buttonholes to all kinds of things, like if you want to do long arm warmers that have buttons up the side. There's just so many applications for doing a buttonhole, and it is an essential skill if you want to knit clothing. So let's stitch. So I have made just a little sample so that we have something to work our buttonholes on, and I'm going to be showing you how to do a horizontal buttonhole for this project. Doing a vertical buttonhole is different, but I have found that the horizontal buttonhole is much more commonly used, and it's something you're going to run into a lot more when you're doing your knitting projects. So let's go ahead and get started with this. If you want to apply this to a project that you're currently working on, feel free to stitch along. You can also just make a little sample to work. This sample is 30 stitches across, and I have 12 rows completed. And I've used the stockinette stitch, which is knit on the right side and then purl on the wrong side, so that it gives you this very uniform looking stitch on your project. So I'm going to go ahead and knit 5 stitches, and then we will go ahead and start the buttonhole. We'll just give ourselves a 5-stitch foundation on the edge here. Okay, so I've got 5. Now I want to make my buttonhole 4 stitches wide in order to accommodate this size of a button, which is 3/4 of an inch. So, and you will need to figure out what size of a button that you're working, that you need a hole for, and then you can adjust your buttonhole accordingly. And you can do that simply by holding the button up and making it slightly smaller than the button so that it will stretch around the button without being too big so that the button falls out, but you don't want it too small so that the button can't actually fit through the hole. So I know that for this 3/4 inch button, I need to do my buttonhole 4 stitches wide. So what we're going to do is we're going to cast off 4 stitches, and this is done in a 2-row process. So the first step is to cast off 4 stitches. So I'm going to go 1, and I'm just doing a simple cast off where you're going to knit 1, and then you're going to pull your previous stitch over and pull your stitch through and let that stitch fall off the needle. So there's 2. I'm going to do that again. So we're going to knit and then go to the previous stitch, slip your hook in, pull on this yarn so it kind of holds that stitch in place, and slide that stitch over and pull up. There's 3, and the last one we're going to knit, go to the previous stitch, slide your hook in, pull on your yarn, and then pass that over the stitch and off the needle. So now what I've created here is a gap, and that is the bottom of the buttonhole. So we're going to knit 5 more, and then we'll practice that again. The very best way to get really skilled at doing different types of stitches and adding new skills to your knitting toolbox or crochet, whatever it is. If it's a handcraft, practicing the same thing over and over again is a great way to get really good at a skill. So we're going to start our buttonhole now by knitting 1 and then into the previous stitch, pull it over and cast it off. 2, knit, insert hook, pull it over, cast it off. That's 2, 3, we're going to knit, insert into the previous stitch, pull it over, cast it off, and 4, to knit, insert the hook, pull it over, and cast it off. So there's my 4-stitch hole. I'm going to do that again, so I'm going to put 5 stitches in between, so I'm just going to knit 5. Okay. And we're going to start our next buttonhole by knitting 1 and then casting off. Over and off. Knit, cast off. There's 2, knit, cast off. There's 3, knit, cast off. And there's 4. Okay, so now we have the bottom of 3 buttonholes. I'm going to go ahead and just knit to the end. Sorry, this keeps flipping up. I hope it's not making the actual buttonhole blurry. Don't want that. I'm just going to knit to the end and then we'll turn around and we'll do the top of our buttonhole. Alright, in my last stitch I'm going to knit into the back of it just to keep that edge nice and tight. Alright, so we're going to turn this around. And we're going to be working in purl stitches because we're doing a stockinette stitch. So depending on what you're doing, if you're working in a garter stitch, this could be done using knits or purls. So whichever stitch you're working on the wrong side of your project, that's the stitch that you'll use, and you can do this with either knits or purls. So we're going to do our 5 stitches here. Sorry, you can hear the needles on the desk here. I'm having a little challenge with that. Trying to keep them up off the desk, but it's not working. So, alright, and there's 5. So now, actually this is the other side, so we'll just work up to where our buttonhole starts, however many stitches that is for you. Alright. Okay, so now we are to our first buttonhole. So you can see we have this gap where we did all of our cast off stitches. So to create the top of the buttonhole, we need to cast on those stitches. So however many you cast off, that's how many you need to cast back on. So I like to do, just when I'm casting on mid-project, I like to do a very simple cast on. There's multiple different methods you can use for this. What I do is I bring it up, twist it, and bring my needle into the back. So it's literally just slipping a stitch on. So again, finger facing you, grab the yarn, turn your finger over, and grab the loop from behind. That's 2. Again, grab the yarn, flip my finger over, slide the hook in, remove my finger and tighten the stitch. There's 3. Bring my finger in to the yarn, flip it over, grab the stitch from behind with the hook, remove my finger, and tighten the stitch. There's 4. So now I've cast on 4 stitches. I'm going to go ahead and continue with my purl stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, we are to the next buttonhole. So we're going to cast on 4 more stitches. And you can just set your hook down. Just make sure that your stitches that are on the hook are far enough back that they're not going to slide off. So put my finger in, turn it over, grab the stitch with the needle, remove my finger, and pull it down. There's 1. 2. 3. And 4. And then we'll continue on with our purl stitches. Okay, go to the next buttonhole. So you can see these buttonholes have formed here where we've got the top and the bottom. We're going to work our last buttonhole. One, 2, 3, and 4. And then we'll do our last few purl stitches to the end, and then I'll show you how we work it going forward on the next row. Okay, so our last purl stitch, and then we're going to turn it over. So you can see we've got our 3 buttonholes have formed here. So now we're just going to work it as normal. So this is a knitting row, so we're going to knit all the way across. And I always start by knitting in the back of the knit stitch to keep my edges, and on the last stitch I always knit into the back of the stitch. I don't like the big gaps on the ends that can sometimes happen if you knit into the front of the stitch on the end. A lot of people will just carry their stitch up without actually working into the stitch. So whatever method you choose. So now we're to our first buttonhole, and these are our cast on stitches, so I'm just going to knit these as usual. So I'm going to knit into these newly cast on stitches, and don't worry if it looks like it's pulling apart a little bit, it all works itself out. If it gets too crazy, you can always go back, but a little bit of a pull, a little bit of a gap with those newly cast on stitches, as you can see, they look totally normal and fine once we're through them. Okay, and again, this keeps pulling up. All right, so there's our last of the 4, and we're just going to keep working down the row, just knitting all the way down. All right, so we're to our next set of cast on stitches. We're going to knit into those. And these are a little more challenging to get into that initial stitch just because they do, there's nothing to leverage them down. So they tend to cling right onto that needle. So just work your needle into the stitch, even if it takes just a minute longer, or it's just a little more challenging. Just work your needle into the back of that, or into the bottom of that stitch, right where the 2 strands of yarn cross. There will be more of a gap there for you. All right, so we're through those 4. Gonna keep knitting down the row. All right, we're to our last buttonhole with our newly cast on stitches. So you can see where this yarn meets that yarn, that's where I'm going to try to put my needle in, because there's going to be more of a gap right there. If you're trying to go in through this front here, it's going to be a little more challenging, so just work your way down to where the 2 strands of yarn meet, and that's where you'll find a little gap for your needle. There's 3, and there's 4. Okay, so we're through all of our newly cast on stitches. I'm going to go ahead and knit to the end. And I'm going to knit into the back of this one. All right, so now if we stretch this out and look at it, you can see, slide this down just a little more so I don't have a stitch fall off the end. There is cute, perfect little buttonholes in your project. So good job, you now know how to do a horizontal buttonhole on a knitted project. So you can now make sweaters or little diaper covers, or even some gorgeous long button-up gloves for the winter that is coming, and you're going to be all set with your new buttonhole skills. So I'm going to go ahead and get this pattern for this cute little diaper cover. This is a 0 to 3 month size, so it's very small for a little newborn, which I think is just precious to have a little onesie with a cute knitted little diaper cover over their bum, and super stretchy and so soft. So I will put the link to the pattern down in the description for you so that you can use your new buttonhole skill and make a cute little diaper cover for the baby in your life. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop down in the comments. You can always find me on Instagram and on TikTok as well. So until next time, happy stitching.